for the SIG security discussion. So Cloud Custodian approached SIG security on Slack and said that they wanted to donate the project to CNCF.
Oh, cool.
There's the GitHub issue. We obviously had talked to them back in August, or someone from the project back in August.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you know, I was aware of it even before then. I've never actually used it, but I think Sarah had noted in the Slack chat that maybe we were probably the likely best subgroup to like look at it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anyone is more intimately familiar with it than I am, or not, but I don't know if we can find other willing victims or volunteers to help out.
Is there some sort of like formal review that they'd want us to do, or like?
Well, no, that is the meta discussion. So in fact, parallel to this, I had filed a ticket in SIG security or a GitHub issue, whatnot, about like, because this keeps coming up. Like people are like, can SIG security own this project, or you know, can SIG security do X, right? So there hadn't been a process defined, as far as I know, that like what projects would SIG security take on, and who would it give it to, and would CNCF, you know, like accept that, and does that mean it's a CNCF project, or is it something different? So I don't think any of that has been worked out. I think, you know, this could be a great straw man template. You know, so I don't know. I would probably want some TOC level guidance from Liz or someone that says, hey, if we go do a bunch of work and say like, yeah, this is a great thing that we should do, is there appetite or process for like fostering that in the CNCF official process? Like, can it become a sandbox project if as a SIG we say, yes, we want this, and here's how we'll maintain it, and here's how we'll organize it? Would TOC basically agree with that? Or is it just going to be throwaway work? So that's about as far as I've thought it through.
So what should we do?
Well, I guess we have a couple of choices. Option one is we just kick it back and say, yeah, we don't want to do anything. Either don't have time or inclination. I said option two would be go back with specific questions like, you know, what does TOC suggest? What is the process? Should we first define a process before we take on a particular instance?
Yeah, I would say, because personally, I feel like I have time. I don't have like mental capacity to do like the meta management of something like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Orchestration.
So if I get like if they can give really clear, like, you know, kind of evaluate on these points, right, report, I would be happy to help out in that way. What I don't necessarily think I have the capacity for is to follow through on all the little details and people across and try to like come up with the approach myself.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, I think that's fair. That's a fair starting point to get back to Sarah and say, look, you know, the process for how we process, you know, these kind of project ideas, whether it's, you know, a new project idea or a wholesale transfer of technology from some other open source thing, you know, we need a few more guardrails to decide, you know, how to move forward. So I can take on that next step of like, we go talk to Dan and Sarah and others on the SIG security who are interested, and say like, let's put some rails down. You know, at least take it to that level.
That'd be great.
Parallel, in the specific instance of Cloud Custodian, they're going to present next week to SIG security on the earlier Wednesday call. I suspect it will be a more detailed version of what we saw back in August. And then there may, at the end of that, will likely be, I'm happy to initiate, there may be some chatter and discussion about, okay, what are the next steps? What is that process? And, you know, where it's relevant, is that a policy work group assignment, or does it go to someone else?
Yeah, that sounds all
Actually, I did a quick re-listen to our presentation in August, and it's not really a policy tool per se. So it's really more kind of an Uber audit tool. So
right. Yeah, yeah.
I'm not sure if policy work group is the right home for it anyway. But that said, I mean, it's definitely an interesting tool, and they did present to us. So there is some overlap. Feel free to comment on the issue there if you have any thoughts.
Yep.
I posted the link to the video that we had, so I think we've done something.
Great.
Yeah. So
next week, the SIG security meeting will be my sleeping meeting, so I have to count on you guys. Okay, the next one, formal verification.
Yeah, so this is again, Sarah was asking for an update. I mean, the short answer is there's not much of an update from me. I haven't had time to really go beyond the very simple toy that I had. What we did here on the SIG security call a couple of weeks ago before KubeCon was Christian from Google had made us aware of this tool that Google released in beta for using AI for checking IAM policies. So that's why I linked that here, this cloud recommender, IAM recommender. So that I put that kind of under the bucket of, hey, AI as a tool for checking RBAC compliance versus formal verification. But then I was thinking maybe they work in concert, because the biggest challenge to formal verification is, of course, modeling the domain. You've got to build it into a set of first order logic or something. So
Yeah.
the idea that AI could help you construct that, and then you run it through the formal verification. So
Yeah, I know there's been a couple of other AI defined policy kind of things come up. I've never been able to fully identify how much it's hype versus actual useful things. Right? Like that's a little bit, or where AI is particularly useful as opposed to sort of a brute forcing, I guess, to find holes.
Yeah, the problem is you have to train the thing first.
right.
Yeah, that means you have to have a good mechanism in place a prior, right? Otherwise, you cannot even train the thing.
Well, there's a slew of startups. There's a couple. I think there's at least one In-Q-Tel startup that I can't remember the name right offhand. But when I went to In-Q-Tel, I had a meeting. They were discussing that. There are a couple of companies out there, startups, that are like behavioral analysis based AI.
Oh.
So they basically just monitor everything that happens, categorize activities as either expected or anomalous, and then kind of build a behavior model from that. And then that would presumably, there'd be some way to give it feedback, or you'd outsource that and build some sort of training set and do some sort of adversarial AI. But somehow you get to a point where you've got a model that says this behavior, this sequence of actions is what we expect, and therefore can I forward engineer a set of RBAC IAM policies from that behavior. And similarly, as I then run in production, anything that doesn't fit that, can I flag that as anomalous now and definitively block it, or at least red flag it? So I think there are a few companies working on various versions of that. Google clearly is with this tool is kind of using that. I think that's, again, Amazon's tools, Guard Duty and Macy I don't know that they've opened the box as to exactly what's AI, what's formal verification and whatnot. But I get the sense from reading kind of the marketing literature on those and the documentation on those, that there's definitely a bit of that kind of behavioral analysis going on.
Yeah, maybe we should also, this seems like we orthogonal in the right way. Like we see multiple problems. One of, they're trying to maybe tackle the analyzing and figuring out what they should block or not block, or and now like what's now which behaviors are not normal or whatever. And then we also have the problem of, well, we already have a bunch of policies that have been slapped together. Here's another place that we could have a bunch of policies coming from and being made, and don't necessarily have a way to make sense of them. So I think they fit together well in a sense. And I guess we don't have to, this will also tie in very nicely with the policy violations CRD possibly is. Hey, we have another, you have an even fancier way to do something? Go ahead and plug in.
Yeah, true.
I think it would be
But if
great.
any of,
Yeah.
I was gonna say, if any of those projects you mentioned want to come talk, that would be good too.
Yeah, I think it would be great that we can use AI for the formulation, even the formulation of the formal verification models, so that they can help, solve much of the very difficult works to define that, and then life become much easier. But that would be a very interesting subject, I think, to use either reinforcement learning or neural network to train a model that could function as a first order logic. Right? That would be yeah, that would be pretty interesting.
I also remember, didn't Facebook had some project of where they were doing some AI on like the syscalls and automating kind of like your policy enforcement.
Really?
Around, yeah, it was one of those, that seems really cool, but also very,
Well, we did that back when I was at Symantec way back when, in the Norton antivirus group. So we did a bit of that. To call it machine learning was generous in that, it was mostly heuristics. We actually bought IBM's antivirus. That was doing actual neural nets, but to call it AI was, again, being generous. But essentially, yeah, I was doing that. We were gathering a bunch of system calls and then running it through the net, and then scoring things as either malicious or not, and there was a sliding scale.
Yeah.
What we never did, though, is kind of the policy level thing of, based on stuff that we thought was okay, now go generate a policy that would allow de novo behavior to get away with that carte blanche. If that makes sense. Yeah. So I guess that to me is where maybe the difference lies, in that in any kind of AI-based or scoring-based or heuristics-based system, you're always going to have this element of uncertainty, Bayesian, spam filters and all these things. You're always going to have this thing where you got to go check the spam bucket to make sure that something good didn't get in the bad bucket. And of course, you're always going to get some few spam that get through the filter and get into your regular inbox. Well, that's okay with spam, but if it's an IAM rule that gives you essentially root access, then an N of 1 is a very bad outcome, right? So kind of whitelisting behavior-based policy rules, because the first 1,000 times we saw this stuff happen, it was okay, so therefore the 1,001st time it's going to be okay, just whitelist it, leads to some pretty interesting incentives that the bad guys will camp out and wait to do their, they'll even game the system, right? They'll do a bunch of stuff that looks like noise and common stuff and wait and slowly trick the system into lowering its guard, and if not outright whitelisting you, and then boom, they'll hit you when you're least expecting it. So that would be the concern there for me. Whereas the formal verification side is, no, you're not leaving anything to probability. You're comprehensively satisfying all Boolean variables in the circuit, and you're proving that all of these transactions are allowed and all of these transactions are disallowed. With all the caveats that go into the search space and optimizations there. But yeah. So,
that was a very good little explanation. It's a fascinating. It's really interesting when you talk about it. Sorry, my dogs they're witching now. And
so, I mean, and I'm just brainstorming here. I haven't put any actual thought in this, but if I was to kind of look at how those could work synergistically, maybe the behavior model does suggest some rules, and then those rules are, really formal, the inputs to formal models, especially for super sensitive roles, like, create new IAM roles. Like that has to then be formally modeled out and verified as not dangerous before you then accept that rule, something like that.
Yeah.
I guess it is also interesting. Are these AI things mostly for just trusted party sort of or is it about only user behavior? Does it matter when we talk about cloud native, or we talk more about the platform level versus, say, the people level? Does that make sense?
I think, so anecdotally, I think the problem, maybe we should reach out to Christian. He's often on the SIG security calls, although I don't think he was on this one this morning. But oftentimes, I think it's just that people, the IAM capabilities in Amazon and Google, and I'm not as familiar with OpenShift, but I assume it's similar, are so granular and so powerful because of that granularity, that managing that gets so complicated and the policies get so complex that people just go binary, like super locked down, nothing can happen, or just everything's wide open. And so this is this is kind of an attempt to find
and then don't touch it. Don't touch it. That's the other rule.
Right, which doesn't really work, right? I mean, kills your velocity if nothing else. So yeah, I think this is probably a attempt to find a reasonable common ground, a middle ground where people can actually get work done and yet sleep at night.
I also add another one. I think this comes out of the Baron Cook's group announced at the re:Invent. The access analyzer. Yeah, this is another formal verification tool.
Cool. I was gonna say they probably were missing a lot of new, who knows what else. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Cool. This is just a cool example.
Yeah, I think we can also reach out to them since they have like bunch of PhDs. See if the AI idea pan out. Yeah, I think chances are they are really working on something AI related.
I'm sure they have some. Yeah.
I mean, all of this work signals to me that, this is, I mean, look, if you look at Kubernetes as a platform, right, all the cloud providers who are offering cloud, they've identified now that things are getting a little more mature. This is a big gap. And that it's, worthy of their building tools, and whether beta or top level, that there's a need. And so if Kubernetes is going to be a mature platform, is this just they outsource this to the cloud platforms and let them handle it, or does it need to be a top level feature in Kubernetes?
Before I forget, do we have on our agenda today a follow up on pod security policies? I know there's some action on that issue again recently.
Oh, I mean, happy we can insert it now if you want to just jump in.
Yeah, I think so. One of the comments what people were wondering about gatekeeper versus like pod security policies, and gatekeeper like a opt-in versus was it secure by default versus, you know, if you have to put up each of the rules that, or if you kind of carve out the exceptions, the difference in the models there. I think people are getting just nervous about it to start. Let me pull it up. Latest comment was someone who I'm not sure who they are. Said they looked at both gatekeeper and PSPs. So it says OPA gatekeeper is open by default model, which everything's allowed, and the admin forbids certain things. PSP is closed by default. Worried about that. There's also some discussion on Twitter, I think. Let me see if I can find them.
So can you, what's happening? I think I'm seeing a different term on it. Yeah.
I can't find it, the Twitter discussion on it, but. So I guess one thing is, how do we plan to bridge the gap? Is do we think we actually have an answer for that? That we plan to bridge the gap by first having a common sort of policy violation format, which allows, we can then add a kind of report only, one option would be a report only flag to PSPs, which could then allow us to turn them on by default if we wanted in a report only mode. That would be one option of how we can bridge this. Or the other one would be to have the set of OPA gatekeeper constraints and be able to verify that they are equivalent to the default PSPs.
So I would kind of see this, and it's a very coarse analogy, but I would see this kind of analogous to just firewall rules and use of firewall in general. So you have a perimeter firewall. In the early days of firewalls, you might have all these complicated rules that explicitly allow lots of different things and deny everything, right? And then it kind of morphed into like, no, just deny everything except port 80 and port 443. And now it's probably just port 443. So you kind of got the situation where now, everything is quote unquote secure because it's all locked down at the perimeter. But once you get in the perimeter, of course, everything's wide open. So firewall rules were just so hard to manage and impossible to reason about. And, of course, you had all this nonsensical, like, document all your firewall rules and review them every day. And, like, nobody did that. So I think it's the same kind of discussion here. And if you have a well-designed, well-architected set of REGO policies, that only exists if you've had a lot of discussion around the team about what are the problems, what are the threats, what are we trying to do here, and can we manage this over time? Do we have a change control policy? You've got a lot of sophistication to get to the point where we're using REGO, and so it's probably more secure, not because of REGO or Gatekeeper, but because you've had all that discussion, right? And people actually understand what is the system supposed to do, what's it not supposed to do, and you just encoded that very amorphous knowledge base into an actual policy. Whereas if nobody really knows what we're doing, and we just, hey, we got to throw up a Kubernetes cluster and let everyone play because we got to get this feature shipped next week, and that's just the easiest way to do it. Let's just lock everything down with a PSP, and then let the ops guys figure it out when we deploy. I mean, that's a lot I've seen in the real world in terms of pre-Kubernetes. I kind of seeing that happen in various ways in the real world and with Kubernetes.
Yeah, I'm seeing it kind of bifurcate into there's anything that's considered the ops level, anything that's like an operator, and doing anything on the host. It's like, we're going to need to touch the host, just give it everything that it can, we'll lock it down later. And now you have a bunch of kind of containers and things, usually all running on the masters, but not entirely, and daemon sets on every, 50 daemon sets on every node that are doing who knows what to the host.
Right.
And fully privileged. And then you have all of the kind of quote unquote applications that have zero permissions to do anything and are, probably causing maybe headaches and maybe in the long run a good evolution of applications re-architecting to work in the less privileged environment. So we kind of have that two ring and nothing, very few in between, because you don't get around. Who gets around to actually making that perfect little security policy? I know there's also an even weirder realm now with like KubeVirt, and where you're running the virtual machines in containers.
Up the madness.
Right, and how like, okay, well that needs its own its own SE Linux policy as well, because that's a whole new layer. So they're having to add kind of new SE Linux policies, then kind of have that put into the proper PSP. And my experience kind of, I guess, is kind of meshing with what you were saying.
Reminds me of that Monty Python bit about we built the castle and it sunk into the swamp. So we built another castle on top of that. It sunk into the swamp. The next castle, it stood.
That we should get that's a great little motivation for our working group here.
Sorry, I'm in a cynical mood today. So the thing I've heard at PSP is that people are just unsure if it's is it going to stay? Is it going to be the thing? Or is it just going to go away? So anything I do with it now is just throwaway work.
Yeah, I think they made a big splash at KubeCon. Yeah, I think they generate a lot of buzz about Gatekeeper.
Like pro PSP buzz? Oh, pro Gatekeeper.
Yeah, pro Gatekeeper. But I think people just excited for the new stuff.
Yeah, OPA is one of the shiny new things, I think.
Yeah. Torren was on the keynote stage.
And I'm sure the CNCF's really happy to have another project because, so that Kubernetes doesn't eat the CNCF.
And like I said, I think long term, when used properly and reasonably, i.e. with all the discussion and all the engineering that would have to happen, a well-reasoned, well-structured, whether it's OPA or Gatekeeper, of course, it's just a deployment detail, but well-reasoned, well-structured REGO policies is a much more secure solution. Um, if by secure you mean resilient, robust, multiple levels of protection. If you really just mean simpler to manage and just binary lockdown or not, then yeah, I could see where PSPs have the upper hand.
Do you know if people are actually like using them together? They probably are often using them together as well. Like,
well, so the one example, I can't say I've seen this in concrete real world scenarios, but it's been discussed in various contexts is, you can write REGO rules for admission control around checking if certain things are set in your PSP. Does that make sense?
yes.
So that would kind of be the nexus of like, I want a PSP, but I don't really want to do the manual work of setting the PSP every time. So I kind of want to set some guardrails around using the right PSP with REGO policies that check the PSP to see if certain things are there or not there. And then that's kind of how I get my guardrail.
Interesting.
That just means you've got to now have somebody who both understands PSP and REGO and the interaction of both and admission control. So yeah.
This is where we get accused of just trying to make job security for ourselves, right?
That's right. That's right. That's where an AI guy will come in, gal, and say, "Oh, it was an AI with
Yeah, but don't forget they're gonna train that model and run it on what's the newest way to run your AI workloads on Kubernetes these days. So you
There you go. I see another castle sinking into the trunk.
Yeah. With every researcher has the root access
That's right.
to the model.
I think the academic or the researcher use cases are very interesting because they're not as security focused in their policy so much as they are like fairness and resource allocation and such. So I think I always like hearing from the researcher use cases since they differ from, say, like the financial or healthcare.
Well, actually, it's funny you mentioned. So I was at Stanford. They had a seminar on AI. It wasn't related to Kubernetes in any way, but just AI in healthcare, and that was a very clear message from the clinicians. So not the research clinicians, the actual like practicing medicine clinicians were like, "Hey, we've seen some of this AI stuff, and it's all cool, but there is no way we're going to use this on patients until we can understand exactly what's going on and reason about when it will work and when it won't work." And I mean, I see parallels there to the same thing in a production commercial as a financial environment, like a bank. I doubt there's going to be any bank that's going to deploy an AI-based security solution in production that would give like total root access if the model says it's okay, unless they can absolutely reason, debug, understand all those decision-making processes. I just don't see that happening. For the same reason the doctors won't, put someone at risk of life and limb based purely on a black box AI. So
yeah, unless it's formally verified.
Again, I know that there are some like efforts within AI to build models that are understandable or like that output kind of their reasoning, if so to speak. I forget what that kind of movement is called.
Yeah, I think that that's yeah, I read about it some time ago. Like understandable AI or something like that.
Yeah, there's some word, yeah.
Yeah, I think I've heard XAI, like explainable AI.
Yeah, maybe it's. Okay, so the Forseti security, this is like a new project or
no? I think it's been around. So Sarah mentioned it in one of her early GitHub issues that she resurfaced recently. Again, just kind of under the heading, should policy work group look at this? Seems to be cool. Most of the committers I think are Google folks, so Google Cloud folks. So
No.
I don't know if we can find anybody or know anybody that wants to present. I think that's probably the next best step. And then
Yeah.
from there we can
I
decide
think
if
I
it's
can. Yeah, I can just find the top contributor, like the K rail. I just ping the guy. To fill information.
so. Yeah, something just maybe. So I think just a
I think
broader.
I've come across this. Yeah, or maybe it was because it was mentioned. Oh, they even have a thing on open policy agent.
Oh yeah, I saw something. All right, well then we should definitely probably look at this
Yeah.
in our copious free time. I think that was my other meta point. I didn't put it on the agenda per se, but I mean, I think it'd be great if we could recruit some additional helpers.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I think all of these are great topics, but
Yeah.
we're only 3 people, so if we could,
Yeah.
I don't know I don't know what the right process for that is. Like, going to more KubeCon events, maybe, since none of us were able to make it.
Okay. Yeah.
Directly kind of pitching companies and say, hey, you really need to be thinking about, if you're using Kubernetes, CNCF, and security, and you really need to be thinking and investing in policy, can you sponsor some participation, or contribute grants or something like that? I don't know.
Yeah.
Or we
Talking
could just
about
appeal to the CNCF and say, hey, can you give us a grant? And we go out and get some PhD, whatever.
Yeah, I wonder if we should also, maybe it's too early, but if these things are always missed, like whatever, any of the summer internships. And if I know like the CNCF, what do they do? If we can kind of present some possible projects that we would love to get some input on.
Yeah. Talking about KubeCon, any like sessions we want to submit? I think today is the deadline, right? Or is it yesterday?
I think it's today.
Good God.
I don't know what time.
The deadline for the next one is already okay. When is the next KubeCon?
In like April, I think, in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a little earlier. That might be why it feels like it's so.
The CFP is just one after another. Yeah, I think Jim from Kiverno also pinged us on the Slack channel about the session topic. So so should we like apply for a like working group level deep dive or intro session? That's the first question. The second one is any like topics for the general session we want to submit.
I think it'd be premature to submit for the general, because I just don't. We've got a lot of good ideas, but we don't have anything really that has traction. I'd say probably maybe to forward that point of recruiting more people and more interest. Yeah, I think probably kind of a recruiting session. Like, here's what here's our interests. Here's the projects that we're talking about, but we need more volunteers.
We sort of need a BOF session, right? That people can right. Yeah.
Like that.
Okay, let me ask around. I think we can always piggyback on the SIG security the deep dive or intro sessions.
Yeah.
Since our work is fairly technical. But let me check if there's any format that like similar to the BOF session. I think that would be the best format for us. not just give a talk, just give a presentation, but interactive session.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly, I don't know what the right format or if there's some, I think there's enough here that, we could do kind of almost like a panel discussion, and we got
right, yeah,
a Google person, an Amazon person, an Azure person, and or a CNCF, an actual top level cube.
I'm a big fan of panel-like things. They're usually pretty easy to put together or run.
Yeah, and so then one of us just
popular
ask the easy questions, but and then just gives the 5-minute tips about what the work group is about, and we'd love more participation, that kind of thing. So yeah, I'd be BOF or some sort of panel might be a good idea.
So shall we considering a panel session?
Real world policy, I don't know what you want to call it.
Sounds like real world crypto.
That's why I don't do that actually, but
Policy analysis or policy verification. I don't want to get too detailed. Got to be high level.
Okay.
yeah.
So
Real world policy. Something like that.
That sounds like a great title.
What the hell is a policy anyway? What's it good for?
Yeah.
You think you know policy. But you don't. Okay.
All your policy belong to us.
So, do you guys want me to submit, or any of you guys can submit the panel?
If you don't mind submitting, since I've never set up all.
If you're volunteering.
Yeah. So just send me your bio and.
Oh goodness.
The title.
What is my updated
that's what the system requires.
I know.
And I think
This one is KubeCon March 30th to April 2nd. Let me check real quick.
Oh, sorry, that's my kid.
That's okay.
March 30th to April 2nd.
Yeah. And is the Netherlands easier to get visas for?
I would think you should be able to, but America is the problem these days.
Right, that's what I'm hoping.
I, in theory, at the moment, should be able to go. Yeah, so it's possible. So it's not explicitly blocked off.
Good.
So I
guess
yeah.
Another question should be, should we try to do more European-friendly times? Do we try that again?
Then the question is, who will participate from Europe?
Well, I know that some of the people in the Falco stuff were Europe, and there was a couple other requests.
Ah, they're from
But
Europe?
it's always, not everyone. I think they're
okay.
very distributed. It's always hard. Yeah, I guess until we have a specific request again. We'll just hold off.
Yeah. The SIG security meeting is okay for Europe, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Either we can just carve out, every time carve out like 15 minutes.
That'll work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would work.
Okay.
I'm moving to the West Coast next week, so I don't really want to put it any earlier anyway.
Oh, really? To the Bay
Yeah.
Area?
No, to LA area, Orange County.
Oh, nice. Orange
Back-
County or?
Yeah, San Juan Capistrano specifically.
Ah, that's where the church,
Yes, the
Yeah.
mission.
yeah,
Yep.
yes. I did my grad study at UC Irvine, so I had a big thing for OC.
Yeah.
I just love there.
I'm gonna have to get used to driving around and
Yes.
sunshine.
And no snow at all.
No snow. Nope. I grew up in the LA area, so my parents are happy I'll be closer to home too.
Okay, great. So, anything else? 我没有做咖啡啊。
No, I think that's it.
Okay, then just send me your title and bio, and let me see if I can squeeze in the panel.
Okay, cool. And then do we want to meet next week, or are we going to do the 2 weeks?
Oh yeah. Shall we switch to the bi-weekly?
Yeah, I
tempo?
think the 2 weeks is still good.
Okay.
So the next one we'll do is on the 18th, and then we'll probably take off 2 weeks after that
Yeah,
for
I will
Christmas,
update the
New Year's.
calendar.
Okay.
Yeah, it is.
Cool.
When is Chinese New Year in this fall? Is that?
Is January 24th that week?
So we'll probably slip in maybe one,
Yeah, it sounds like we'll have one in January, maybe.
Yeah.
maybe two.
Yeah. Well, winter is slow. It's okay.
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 Right. Well, good to
Right.
catch up.
All right.
All right.
Maybe
you,
we'll
guys.
do one more before. Cheers.
All right. Bye.
Okay. Bye.